Chapter 28 Training Montage. Days flew by. Sunny only had 4 weeks to prepare himself for the journey into the dream realm, so there wasn't even a minute to spare. He was relentless, pushing his body and mind to the limits in an attempt to absorb as much knowledge and skills as possible in that short amount of time. In the day, he studied with teacher Julius, slowly learning how to survive and take care of himself in the absence of civilization. Their lessons ranged from comparatively simple, like various ways to produce fire, to much more obscure and esoteric, like celestial navigation. What was so hard about celestial navigation? Well, as it turned out, the dream realm was not consistent in terms of star geography. Different regions had different stars and constellations, as well as a different number of moons. While the sun seemed to be the same, its behavior was highly unpredictable. Still, with sufficient knowledge, one could find ways to study the skies and subsequently navigate themselves. Most of these lessons were, supposedly, already included in the various school curriculums and known to the majority of sleepers. However, learning something from a textbook and learning the same thing from an actual awakened were two completely different matters. Teacher Julius had a habit of going much more in depth when explaining his subject. Thanks to this time-consuming habit of his, Sunny not only learned about the what, but also often gained glimpses into the why. This nascent understanding of the underlying principles of the dream realm environments gave him the ability to face any situation with at least some measure of readiness. Even the lessons in dead languages, which Sunny had initially judged to be useless, turned out to be much more interesting than he could ever imagine. This was, in large part, because it concerned the spell itself. After all, the spell communicated with humans in one of those dead languages. By knowing the language, he was able to understand its various remarks and descriptions better. The simplest example of this was Nephis and her true name, Changing Star. While technically correct, this translation failed to properly convey the exact meaning. By understanding the grammatical structure of the rune language, it was easy to extrapolate and see that the more correct translation would have been Star of Change. More than that, there were different runes for change, each with its own connotation. Depending on what exact rune was used to relay the meaning of the name, it could also mean ruinous star or star of misfortune. A small change in wording and connotation could mean a world of difference in real life. Sunny, who had never seriously studied before, found the process of acquiring vast amounts of theoretical knowledge strange, numbing and exhausting. However, in a sense, it was also exhilarating. After all, knowledge was something that only the privileged had access to. It was also this authority over knowledge that kept them in the position of power, creating a vicious circle of inequality. The poor had no opportunity to study, and without the advantage of good education, they had no way to stop being poor. The weirdest part about all of this was that Sunny was now one of those privileged people. More than that, he was at the pinnacle of social hierarchy. Not only had he gained access to an unlimited amount of knowledge, but even his basic needs like food and shelter were also taken care of by the government, allowing him to fully focus on the single goal of developing himself as an awakened. This sudden transformation would have sent him into a whirlpool of philosophical reflection if he had any time to spare. But he didn't, because teacher Julius also insisted on holding practical lessons every other day. Even if some of them had to be done in virtual reality simulations, he insisted on using the full immersion stations with enhanced physical feedback. As a result, Sunny was bone-tired and utterly exhausted. The good thing was that with such amount of exercise, coupled with his newly reforged body, Sunny had never been in better shape. Even without combat training, he could feel his strength, stamina and agility improving by leaps and bounds. Basically, the peculiar rebirth he had experienced after completing the first nightmare had enhanced the innate potential of his body, bringing it to the peak of the human condition. However, it was up to him to realize that potential was sweat, effort, and a lot of hard work. practical application of wilderness survival techniques provided him with the opportunity to do so. And as though this wasn't enough, Sonny secretly collected information about other sleepers and practiced shadow control every night. His shadow was independent enough to be sent on scouting missions without his direct control. It would sneak here and there, listening in on the conversations and observing different classes where sleepers had to demonstrate their aspect abilities. Then, after Sonny had finished his supper and returned to his room, it would come back and share everything it had heard and seen during the day. The only problem with this arrangement was that the shadow, despite its outward snarkiness, turned out to be rather naive. It didn't quite understand how the human world worked, and as such, often failed to distinguish between useful information and meaningless chatter. So, most of the time, Sonny would receive nothing of value or juicy gossip instead of important secrets. This is how he learned that in the sleeper center, romance was in the air. After all, there were 100 beautiful young people locked underground in close proximity to each other, with the added spice of a deathly threat hanging above their heads. Many felt that life was short, and it was their time to seize the day. Passion bloomed in the shadow of approaching danger. Sonny was excluded from this whole side of the thing, of course. Firstly, he had already positioned himself to be perceived as an unlikable lunatic. Secondly, he simply had no time for anything except for his lessons and training. And lastly, he was wary of getting too close to anybody, afraid that a situation would arise where he would have no choice but to divulge his true name. Apart from gathering information and slowly learning about the scope and details of various aspect abilities, and to a lesser extent, flaws, he was also experimenting with shadow control. The results were very promising. He quickly found out that his shadow was able to enhance various objects, and not only his body. If it wrapped itself around a weapon, the weapon strike harder and deliver more damage. If it was applied to an armor, the armor would become sturdier and harder to break. The enhancement was rather substantial, too. It was roughly twice as much as the initial value. All in all, this ability, if used correctly, could make him a powerhouse among the sleepers. Many combat aspects could deliver more speed or damage, many could provide more defense and protection, but none were as well-rounded and versatile as Shadow Slave. With the added utility of Shadow Sight, Shadow Step and Shadow Scout, it was truly incredible. Just like that, day after day passed, slowly turning into weeks. Before Sonny even knew it, the winter solstice was already here. Chapter 29: The Last Day on Earth. On the day of the winter solstice, Sonny woke up feeling tired and drowsy. No matter how much he tried to shake off this listlessness, it wouldn't go away. In the end, he just stayed in the bed for a while, wrapping himself in a blanket. He was already familiar with this feeling of never-ending and snaring sleepiness. It was the same in the days before his first nightmare. It was also quite similar to what he had experienced while slowly dying of hypothermia on the slopes of the Black Mountain. Remembering the cold embrace of approaching death, Sonny couldn't help but shiver. This was his last day on Earth, at least for a while. By nightfall, the spell was going to take him away once again, this time to challenge the vast expanse of the dream realm. What was he going to face in that ruined magical world? Would luck be on his side this time, or would there be another disaster? Ugh! There was no point in guessing. He had already done everything in his power to prepare for the inevitable. He studied hard, trained hard, and kept his secrets safe. His aspect was better than most, and his will to survive was long tempered by the harsh reality of the outskirts, and the even harsher ordeal of the first nightmare. All in all, he was ready. With a sigh, Sonny got out of bed and went along with his morning routine. If this was going to be his last hot shower in a long while, he was going to really enjoy it. If it was going to be his last scrumptious breakfast for the time being. Actually, he had no appetite. The cafeteria was full of sleepers, but no one was talking. Everybody was in low spirits, and seemed to be uncharacteristically introspective. There was no usual laughter or boisterous conversations, only the legacies remained calm and collected. However, even they kept to themselves. Sunny thought about the last time he was preparing to enter the spell and, with a bit of trepidation, approached the coffee machine. During his stay in the academy, he had long discovered that a lot of people were in a habit of adding sugar and milk to their coffee. So, on this auspicious day, he decided to give it another try. After all, it was nice to have a tradition. A few minutes later, he had taken his usual seat near Kasia, the blind girl. Despite their compulsory closeness, they had not talked to each other even once, just like two strangers forced to share the same space by circumstances beyond their control. Sunny did not see a reason for anything to change today. However, as soon as he took the first sip of coffee, Kasia suddenly turned her head and stared at him with her beautiful, blind blue eyes. Unnerved, Sunny looked around, checking if someone else had attracted her attention, and, after making sure that there wasn't anyone standing behind him, asked, What? Kasia was silent, as though hesitating if she should reply, and then suddenly said, Happy birthday. What? Sunny frowned, trying to comprehend the meaning behind her words. Then, a flash of surprise appeared on his face. Oh, right. It's my birthday today. He had completely forgotten about it. He was turning 17 today. Wait, how did she know about this? Sunny gave the blind girl a strange look, opened his mouth, and then decided to let the issue go. She was just too creepy. Thanks. With a nod, Kasia turned away and seemingly lost interest in having a conversation once again. Which was for the better. Sunny returned to his coffee, finding it not too bad this time. Of course, sugar and cream were making most of the work. However, he did feel a little bit more awake after drinking it. 17, huh? Sunny was never sure that he would make it to this age alive. And yet, despite everything he did, life was sure unpredictable sometimes. If anyone would have told him a year ago that he was going to celebrate his 17th birthday by drinking real coffee with real milk and sugar, he would have laughed in their face. But now it was a reality. Unwillingly, Sunny remembered all the people who used to celebrate his birthdays with him, a long time ago. Before his mood turned sour, he decisively dispelled these thoughts and forced himself to smile. This is not bad. Let's do it again next year, when I'm already awakened. Cheering himself up like that, he finished his coffee and left the cafeteria. There were no classes today, but he still visited the wilderness survival classroom and said his goodbyes to teacher Julius. The old man got pretty emotional when sending him off. He gave Sunny one last tip, a dozen or so times in a row, and even promised to apply for a research assistant position to be opened after the young man had become a full awakened. Sunny left thanking him for his time and patience. After that, there wasn't much to do. When the sun was close to setting, Instructor Rock gathered them in the foyer of the Sleeper Center and led them outside. In the snowy parks that surrounded the white building, other awakened were leading their own batches of sleepers to the same destination. It was the Academy's medical center. The center looked more like a shrine than a hospital. Its interior contained both highly advanced technology as well as some of the best healers among the awakened. For the duration of their first journey into the dream realm, the bodies of sleepers would be kept safe in specially designed pods and sustained by the magical powers of those healers if anything unfortunate were to happen on the other side of the spell. Of course, whether or not they would wake up in the end wholly depended on the sleepers themselves. To Sunny's surprise, after entering the medical center, Instructor Rock did not take them directly to the wing containing sleeper pods. Instead, he led them to a comparatively deserted floor and then opened the doors to a spacious gallery that was brightly illuminated by the beautiful crimson rays of the setting sun. There, they saw rows and rows of wheelchairs. In each wheelchair, there was a person with a blank, strangely peaceful expression on their face. All these people were completely silent, motionless, and still. They did not show any reaction to the appearance of guests. They all seemed to be empty. In the eerie silence, Sunny felt his hair standing up and a creeping terror sipping deep into his heart. Instructor Rock looked at the empty people with solemn eyes. "There is a reason I brought you all here. Look well and remember. Some of you may know who these people are. For those of you who don't, they are called Hollow." He gritted his teeth. Each one of them was once either a sleeper or an awakened. Some of them were weak, some of them were strong. Some were even incredibly powerful. All of them have perished in the dream realm. Their souls are gone, Sunny realized, horrified. If you're lucky, once your spirit is destroyed, your body dies with it. But if not, you'll become just like them. Hollow. Instructor Rock glanced in the direction where Castor and Nephi stood, and then added, "So don't die out there." Half an hour later, sleepers had been led to their personal rooms and were preparing to enter the pods. In one of the rooms, the blind girl, Kasia, was helplessly trying to orient herself in the unfamiliar space, touching the walls and strange pieces of machinery with her hands. Tears were streaming down her beautiful, doll-like face. In the other room, proud Legacy Castor was staring listlessly at the floor. His lips were moving, repeating one strange phrase over and over again. He was trembling. Somewhere else, Changing Star Nephis, the last daughter of the Immortal Flame clan, was looking down at her hands. Underneath her skin, soft white radiance was slowly growing brighter and brighter. Her face was contorted in a grimace of harrowing agony. And finally, there was a room where Shadow Slave Sunless, lost from light, turned away from the sleeping pod and glanced down at his shadow. "Well? Are you ready?" The shadow shrugged and didn't answer. Sunny sighed. "Yeah, me too." With that, he stepped forward and climbed into the pod. In the vast echoing darkness, he heard, "Welcome to the Dream Realm, Sunless." Chapter 30 Starless Void. Sunny was expecting to first look at the place where his arrival to the Dream Realm was going to take place from above, just like it had happened at the beginning of the first nightmare. Back then, time had magically moved in reverse, giving him an opportunity to see hints of what he was going to face. Instead, immediately after hearing the greetings of the spell, Sunny found himself blind and drowning. As he instinctively tried to open his mouth to scream, salty water rushed inside, making him choke and twitch. More than that, he couldn't see anything. No, it's not that he couldn't see, it's just there was no source of light around. Usually, darkness wasn't a problem for Sunny, but for some reason, his sight wasn't working anymore. Maybe the seawater he was submerged in was blocking it. If it wasn't for the special space perception that the affinity to shadows gave him, he would have been completely disoriented. With its help, though, he barely managed to understand which side was down, and which side was up. Luckily, Teacher Julius's lessons had included swimming. Swearing to thank both the old man and Master Jet once he came back, Sunny forced himself to stay calm and began to swim upward. In a few long and tense seconds his head broke through the surface of the water. Sunny was finally able to draw in a deep, hoarse breath. "Breathe, breathe. You're still alive." After sucking in enough air to soothe his burning lungs and compose himself to a certain degree, Sunny carefully spun in the water, trying to take in his surroundings. What met him was an endless, jet-black expanse of undulating waves. Above them was an empty black sky. There was no moon, no stars, just a dark vastness of repressive nothingness. Sunny blinked a few times, cold dread taking hold of his heart. This is a sea? An ocean? Was I dropped in the middle of an ocean? No, it couldn't be. There had to be solid ground somewhere nearby. As he was gripped by a momentary panic, a remote sound suddenly drew his attention. Sunny turned around and saw a triangular dorsal fin moving in his direction. Luckily, it was still hundreds and hundreds of meters away. Wait, if it's so far away, then how come I can see it so clearly? Despite being submerged in water, Sunny still felt like there was suddenly cold sweat all over his body. By his estimation, that dorsal fin was at least 5 meters tall. It was rapidly approaching, growing visibly larger with each second. Damn you, Spell! With eyes full of horror, Sonny spun again, desperately trying to find something, anything, to save him. And there, a short distance away, he finally noticed a black mass protruding slightly above the water. Not wasting even a second on thinking, he started to swing his arms and legs, swimming in the direction of the black mass with a considerable speed. However, no matter how fast he swam, the giant shadow of the unknown creature was closing the distance between them much faster. A small part of Sonny's mind managed to preserve its rationality even when faced with this boundless, primal fear. Not allowing himself to slip entirely into panic, Sonny tried to think, and then silently commanded his own shadow to wrap itself around his body. Instantly his speed increased twofold. Just seconds before the unknown colossus got to him, Sonny reached the black mass, stretched out his hands, and pulled himself out of the water. He rolled away from the edge, scratching his skin on the uneven rocks, and jumped in fright when the whole surface underneath him shuddered, as though something massive had collided with it. As Sonny backed out, terrifying jaws appeared from the water, with rows and rows of giant teeth, each one as long as he was tall. He opened his eyes wide, understanding that the rock he had climbed on was not tall enough to save him from the monster. Why is it even trying to eat me? I'm too small to be considered a filling snack for something this enormous. However, before the monster had a chance to attack, a colossal tentacle suddenly broke through the water and rose into the air like some strange, black tower. Before too long, it fell down, entangling the owner of the giant maw and pulling it back under the water. Sonny lost the feeling in his legs and plopped on the ground, his mouth opened. His whole body was shaking. A few seconds later, the dark sea was calm again, as though nothing has happened. The indifferent waves continued to move silently under the lightless sky. So, it wasn't trying to eat me, he realized, frozen. It was trying to run away. A few minutes later, Sonny was pretty sure that nothing was going to devour him, at least not immediately. With that certainty, he was finally in a state of mind to stop trembling and explore his surroundings a little. The black mass he climbed onto turned out to be a single stone platform of around 12 meters in diameter. Its surface was mostly flat, covered with grooves, and somewhat dry. Due to the regular shape of its edges, it seemed more like something man-made than a natural formation. But then again, here in the dream realm, it was hard to be sure that something man-made was actually made by humans as opposed to. Better not to think about it. The platform wasn't connected to anything, existing as a tiny island in the sea of darkness. There wasn't anything else above the water for as far as Sonny was able to see. After discovering that fact, he also realized something else. It was that he was wet, cold, and completely naked. In his defense, the clothing situation was the last thing one would think about when trying to save themselves from abyssal monsters. Also, it's not like someone was here to witness his stark paleness and private bits. Still, it was sort of cold. Sonny summoned the puppeteer's shroud and watched as dark gray garments covered his body. It even came with a pair of high, soft-soled leather boots. Clad in gray fabric and lusterless leather, he suddenly felt much safer. Not to mention warm. After that, Sonny sat down in the middle of the platform, as far away from water as he could, and tried to remember the unique characteristic of every explored region of the dream realm he could think of. Unfortunately, none of them matched this starless, dark void. Of course not, he thought with a bit of resentment. Even if some unlucky humans had ever come here, I doubt that they were able to return to the real world alive. Not with those things hiding underwater. Not yet desperate enough to leave the platform and try to swim away in search of land, Sonny decided to wait and see. Maybe something was going to change as time went by. With a soft sigh, he habitually looked for his shadow. However, due to the total darkness that surrounded him, it couldn't really be seen. He just barely felt its presence. This must be a paradise for you, right? All this gloom and not a star in sight. The shadow, of course, did not answer. Anyway, good job earlier. With a nod, Sonny lay down, using his hands as a pillow. Not thinking about much, he stared into the black sky and waited. The sound of the undulating waves was, actually, quite relaxing. After a while, he closed his eyes and listened. Minutes merged together, growing into hours. Suddenly, Sonny caught a slight change in the sound of the sea. It was as though something was shifting. He opened his eyes and noticed that one corner of the sky was slowly turning gray. Soon, a glimpse of a pale sun could be seen rising above the horizon. A new day had come to the starless void. And with it, the dark sea suddenly surged.